All right, let's jump right into this. Now, this isn't about debating culture or tradition, not at all. Today, we're looking at a huge life decision, sometimes a life or death one, through a totally different lens: risk assessment. We're going to explore what happens when the old systems we used to rely on to calculate risk just catastrophically fail.
Just think about that for a second. You're newly married, you might have some arguments, sure, but you figure, hey, we've got our whole lives to work it out. But what if they're not thinking about working it out at all? What if they're actually thinking about how to get you out of the picture for good?
You know, this isn't some hypothetical scenario. This is exactly what happened to Ashish Kumar, a 27-year-old man from Rajasthan. And his story, it's a really chilling example of a risk that was completely miscalculated.
So on the surface, the story seems simple. A tragic hit-and-run accident. The wife told the police that robbers hit them with their vehicle and then stole her jewelry. But right away, things just didn't add up. For one, she was barely hurt. And two, the marks on Ashish's body, they didn't look like they were from a car crash. They were from strangulation. The police investigation uncovered a horrifying truth. There was no hit and run. There was no robbery. It was the wife, her boyfriend from before the marriage, and a couple of accomplices. They had brutally murdered Ashish and then faked the whole thing. And here's the part that just sends a shiver down your spine. This all happened just 3 months after they got married.
It's so easy to look at a story like this and just write it off as a terrible, unlucky event, right? A tragic case of marrying the absolute wrong person. But is that the real reason Ashish is gone? Was it just bad luck?
No, it wasn't just bad luck. It was a failure in calculation. See, he was operating on the assumption that his partner, like most people, just wasn't capable of something so extreme. He couldn't factor in the tiny, tiny possibility that she was in that small, incredibly dangerous minority who was. And that one miscalculation, it was fatal.
For generations, there was actually a system for this kind of risk assessment, especially when it came to arranged marriages. It's called social vetting. His family probably tried to use it, but here's the thing. That system is completely broken now. Let's dig into why.
So, what in the world is social vetting? Well, think of it like the entire community acting as a collective background checker. It's this long-term public observation of a person's character, their behavior, and any potential red flags that might pop up over the years.
And this whole system was built on 2 key pillars. First, you had your vetting agents. These are the neighbors, the relatives, the village elders. And second, you had the database, which was basically a person's entire life, lived out in public for 20+ years for everyone and anyone to see.
And look, this system, it worked pretty well for a very long time. But in our modern world, it has completely and utterly collapsed. So let's break down why social vetting is pretty much impossible today.
What's so wild about this is the huge shift it shows. In the past, your life was local. You grew up, went to school, and probably worked all in the same area. Your life was basically an open book. But today, people move away for college, then move again for a job. Our lives are lived privately, and so much of it is digital. Those old vetting agents are gone, and that public database of knowledge is basically empty.
And this table just illustrates the problem perfectly. Take a look at these major risk factors. In the past, if someone had a violent temper, the whole village knew about it. Faking your financial status? No way. Not when everyone knew your family. Past relationships, the local gossip network, those original vetting agents, made sure nothing stayed secret for long. And substance use? Back then, it was mostly alcohol, which is pretty hard to hide in a small community. But today, all of this can be completely and easily hidden.
The honest truth is, your real life can exist entirely on your phone, behind a password. And if your own parents have no idea what's really happening in your life, what chance does a stranger's family have of finding out before a marriage? Social vetting is dead. You're not making a calculated risk anymore, you're just gambling. But this breakdown, it doesn't just make marriage a huge gamble. It actually points to a much, much deeper problem. See, when the community can no longer see you, who do you even become? When you're not accountable to anyone, where do you find your identity? This vetting gap has created a vacuum, and it's led to a serious identity crisis for an entire generation. I mean, just take this recent case from Ghaziabad. 3 sisters between 12 and 16 years old, married total strangers. Why? Because they were completely obsessed with South Korea, and their parents took their phones away as a punishment. They were literally trying to escape to a fantasy world they had built in their own minds. This quote really reveals the depth of the crisis. They didn't just admire Korean culture. They rejected their own identity so fiercely that being called Indian actually made them angry. In their minds, they were Korean.
So why does something like this even happen? Well, biologically, we are all wired to have an idol, someone we look up to. Traditionally, that role was filled by family or by faith. You knew who you were. But when those traditional anchors are gone, that need doesn't just disappear. You still search for an idol. You just outsource your identity to celebrities, to K-pop stars, people who don't know you exist, who can't guide you, and who will never ever be a part of your reality. And that always ends in catastrophe.
So, if the old systems are broken and outsourcing our identity is a recipe for disaster, what's the solution? Well, it's about learning to make your own calculations. It's about rejecting the so-called safety of the crowd.
The person who created this analysis actually shared a personal story. He was a chemical engineer with a great job offer, the safe path. But he quit. Why? Because he ran what he calls a mathematical calculation for his own happiness, and that high-paying job scored a 0. He chose to trust his own math over the path that society told him to take.
And this leads us to a really powerful, kind of counterintuitive idea. We always think the riskiest path is the one nobody takes, but the truly dangerous path, it's the one that everyone is on. It's the herd path.
Take the recent insight from the CEO of NVIDIA. For years, we were all told the safest, smartest career was coding. It's hard, it pays well, it was the ultimate safe bet. But what was one of the very first jobs to be seriously threatened by AI? Coding. Meanwhile, jobs that are incredibly difficult for AI, like plumbing or being a creative hairstylist, those were overlooked. The very path everyone rushed to became the most vulnerable.
And that's the core lesson here, isn't it? Society will always give you a default path. Get the safe job, get married, because that's what you do. But when that path leads to a dead end or to a tragedy like what happened to Ashish Kumar, society offers 0 help. You're the one who has to face the consequences, all alone.
So the only way to really survive and thrive is to stop blindly following the herd and to start doing your own math. You have to assess the risks for yourself, based on your reality, not on what everyone else is doing. Which leaves us with one final thought. What is the calculation for your own life?